confidence. He wants to see it ended also.
Oh,
That's
it's
good.
just him talking about it. Okay.
And
yeah,
we're
here
going
we
to
go.
work toward getting it ended and as fast as possible. It's a horrible situation going over. It's flat land, and the bullet goes off, and the only thing it can hit is a body, a human body, a young human body. And they're losing just tremendous numbers of mostly soldiers. The cities and towns have been largely demolished. It's a shame what's happened to that country. It would have never happened if I were president. That I can tell you. Would have never happened. It's to look at that. And October 7th would have never happened either, by the way.
Day.
Middle East. But we'll get it. I think we'll get it. We'll get something done. We're going to be meeting. Actually, tomorrow they're meeting in Munich, as you know, and we're going to have some other meetings. And I'll be dealing with President Putin largely on the phone, and we ultimately expect to meet. In fact, we expect that he'll come here, and I'll go there, and we're going to meet also probably in Saudi Arabia. The first time we'll meet in Saudi Arabia, see if we can get something done. But we want to end that war. That war is a disaster. It's a really bloody, horrible war.
You said in Saudi Arabia, the first meeting will happen.
I think so. We think we're going to probably meet in Saudi Arabia, the first meeting.
Oh, boy.
Hasn't been set, but not too distant future.
Did you also be part of that meeting?
We both understand, we know the Crown Prince. And
we'll watch this for like 20 minutes, and then we're going to get ready for the PlayStation thing.
It sounds like that would just be a meeting between you and Putin and perhaps the Crown Prince, but not President Zelensky.
Assuming it's not over
we'll
by
have
then.
a first meeting, and then we'll see what we can do about the second meeting.
Did you also commit to go to Ukraine?
What about Ukraine?
Did you commit to go to Ukraine?
No, I haven't. I haven't committed to go to Ukraine. I would think about going. Yeah, I'd think about it. No problem.
You say today, Mr. President, that they received your vision. What is your plan to end this war? Like today, Secretary.
Well, I'm not going to tell you my plan. I can just tell you we've made a lot of progress. This should have been done by Biden,
that's what I think a lot of people are
this
concerned
has
about.
been going on for now a long time, years, and it should have been done by Biden. Just like the young gentleman that I brought home yesterday after 2 weeks. We worked on it for 2 weeks. He was a fine man, and he was in there for 3.5, almost 4 years, and they weren't able to do a thing, and I got him out. And as you know, I didn't pay $6 billion. I didn't pay anything. We did a trade, and we did a good job. We got him out in 2 weeks. It should have been out years ago. It really should have been out years ago.
Oppose NATO membership for Ukraine?
Oh,
I don't think it's practical to have it, personally. I know that our new Secretary of Defense, who's excellent, Pete, made a statement today saying that he thinks it's unlikely or impractical. I think probably that's true. I think long before President Putin, they said there's no way they'd allow that. This has been going on for many, many years. They've been saying that for a long time, that Ukraine cannot go into NATO. And I'm okay with that. I just want the war, whether they are or they're not. But it certainly would seem to be that most people have said that is something that's not going to happen.
Are you freezing out President Zelensky of this process a bit? Isn't there a danger of that?
No, I don't think so, as long as he's there. But, at some point you're going to have elections, too. You're going to have an election.
He says he wants security assurances, Mr. President. What does that look like?
In terms of what?
If the war were to end, he says he wants guarantees of security.
We'll see what that means. I think when the war ends, one thing he was very strong about, if it ends, he wants it to end. And that's President Putin said that. He wants it to end. He doesn't want to end it and then go back to fighting 6 months later.
Well, yeah, obviously.
We talked about the possibility, I mentioned it, of a ceasefire so we can stop the killing. And I think we'll probably end up at some point getting a ceasefire in the not-too-distant future.
Do you view Ukraine as an equal member of the peace process?
Say it, what?
Do you view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process?
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace. I said that was not a good war to go into, and I think they have to make peace. That's what I think.
Why did you decide to provide support to Ukraine?
Would you support Zelensky ceding territory or exchanging territory in any agreement to end the war?
Well, he's going to have to do what he has to do, but, his poll numbers aren't particularly great. to put it mildly. He's got a country where, it's been savaged and attacked, and he's got an army that's been very, very brave, actually, despite the fact that, we've given him, in my opinion, $350 billion. That's what the real number is. You don't hear that number. And Europe has given, in my opinion, $100 billion. And they've done it in the form of a loan. And I have a Secretary of Treasury right now who's actually quite brave. He's over in Ukraine on a train. And there's a lot of things happening around that train that aren't so good. And he's going there to get a document done where we're going to be assured that we're going to, in some form, get this money back, because we're putting up far more money than Europe, and Europe is in far more danger than we are. We have an ocean in between. Europe has nothing in between. You know what they have in between? They have Ukraine in between. So wait a minute.
You missed it? What did I miss?
So, as you know, Europe is putting up money, and they're getting it in the form of a loan. And the United States under Biden didn't do loans. They just handed money every time somebody walked in from Ukraine. They just handed them money.
He wants the minerals from Ukraine as payment? Yeah, he already said that.
It should have never happened. It should have never started.
Yeah, that was already stated.
Once it did, other things should have happened. Other things should have taken place. So we're getting security on our money. We're going to have it secured by, they have rare earth, and they have oil and gas, and they have a lot of other things. And we're asking for security on our money. They've agreed to it. Ukraine has agreed to it.
Does it mean you are not sending any more aid to Ukraine?
No, we are, but we want it secured, and the money is going to be secured.
Yeah.
When will the U.S. stop sending funding?
You're wrong. He's wrong. They're all wrong.
Because
everybody's wrong.
That, then Putin would say he won. We're the thing that's holding it back, and frankly, we'll go as long as we have to go, because we're not going to let the other happen. But President Putin wants to have peace now, and that's good. And he didn't want to have peace with Biden.
Was that conversation with Putin?
And you tell me why that is, okay?
Was that conversation with Putin?
Well, because he killed his civilians. I mean, I feel like that's pretty fair.
No, but it was a nice thing that he allowed Mark Fogel to leave. In fact, Mark wasn't feeling well, but he was, all of a sudden, about 2 weeks ago, he started being treated very nicely. He said they took him out for haircuts. They took him out. They helped him out a little bit and made him feel better, made him look better.
Oh, jeez.
And they were nice to him. And he said, I saw something happening, and it coincided with when I came into office. So that was nice. And he's a fine person. He was so happy to be out. He was there for 3.5 years plus. And he shouldn't have been there at all. They should have had him out much faster than that. Wait, go ahead, please.
Sorry. Sir, just to be clear, do you see any future in which Ukraine returns to its pre-2014 borders?
Well, I think Pete said today
that's a pretty good
unlikely,
question.
Right?
Yeah.
It certainly would seem to be
very
unlikely.
Good question.
They took a lot of land, and they fought for that land, and they lost a lot of soldiers. But it would just seem to me, and I'm not making an opinion on it, but I've read a lot on it, and a lot of people think that that's unlikely. Some of it will come back. I think some of it will come back. Yeah, some of that land will come back. Who are you with? Yeah.
AFPs.
You who?
AFP?
Okay.
He doesn't even know who they are, so he can't talk shit.
The things that the Secretary of Defense was talking about,
because that's what he was thinking.
And the lack of NATO membership. Ultimately, these are
This
both
Yahoo?
that Russia
Really?
has made
Yahoo
in the
does
past.
news?
Is there not a danger of handing Russia a kind of win on this?
Oh, jeez.
Well, I think that if you look at the war, the way the war is going, you'll have to make your own
Gulf of
determination.
America.
I'm just here to try and get peace. I don't care so much about anything other than I want to stop having millions of people killed. Killed. Last night, Kiev got hit very, very hard. I want to see people stop getting killed. That war is ridiculous. It should have never happened, and it would have never happened. Yeah, a couple of more questions.
Are you planning to sign an executive order on reciprocal tariffs, sir?
Yes, I am. In fact, I may do it today.
More
and
tariffs.
If I do it today, I could almost do it
Jesus.
right now. Would you like me to talk about it now? I don't want to take anything away from this young lady's day, because this is her day. And I may do it later on, or I may do it tomorrow morning, but we'll be signing reciprocal tariffs. The world has taken advantage of the United States for many years. They've charged us massive tariffs that we haven't charged them. And as you know, I just did something on steel and aluminum, 25%. That'll go up at some point, but 25%, which will level the playing field quite a bit. I did it previously 50%, and Obama was very weak, and Biden was even weaker on steel. The steel was just absolutely, it really started with Obama. The world really took advantage of us, and then that morphed into Biden. And what they did was he was so worried about trying to attack his political opponent that he didn't know what he was doing with respect to countries taking advantage. He should have looked at the countries, both friend and foe, taking advantage of us. So we're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs, which is whatever they charge, we charge, very simply. But we're going to be...
Considering exemption, talk about widespread fraud and abuse.
Oh, yeah, there was tremendous fraud. There's tremendous fraud. And it's hard to believe that you can have that kind of fraud. You're talking about, like, are you talking about what? Wait. Which are you talking? You're talking about with regard to all of the investigations that are going on about this stupidity. Yeah. What we're going to do is tomorrow I'm having a news conference. I'm going to read to you some of the names that hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars have been given to. And if you tell me that we should be giving money to those things, those entities, I think you'll probably have to leave as a reporter because you're not very talented. When you look at the kind of money, billions and billions of dollars being thrown away illegally.
Fucking poll.
And there's no chance. I mean, I say it in front of our Attorney General, there's no chance that there's not kickbacks or something going on. When you give millions and millions of dollars to somebody that stands to look at something for 15 minutes and walks away with millions of dollars, that money's coming back in some form. And that's only one form of corruption. The biggest thing is what they do to our country. They're taking massive amounts of money and spending it on items. I went through a list of 200 expenditures that were made, and I found 3 that looked like they were reasonable.
Jesus Christ.
3. And we'll be talking about that tomorrow. We have a lot of stuff, and I want to commend Elon because he's done a fantastic. He doesn't need this. You know, he's abused by you people every day. He's found more things than anybody could find. I think he's got the credibility to do it. I know he does. And it's his group of people. You know, they started off with 12. I call them 12 geniuses. They started off with 12, and they went to 20 and 25, and now they're up to almost 100.
Damn.
People are joining to help them because there's a massive fraud that's taken place. And then you have judges that are activists, and they sit there and they say, oh, as an example, $59 million going to a little small group in New York City. You get nothing going to North Carolina to help nothing. They say, we don't have any money because they've given it away on the border. But you have nothing. What they did to North Carolina is a shame. And then they sent $59 million to New York City for a hotel for a little bit of nothing. What they've done, a hotel that was not luxury, that's getting luxury rates for migrants, where they're making a fortune, and we catch them. But a judge says, well, even though it may be a fraud, you have to send the money in anyway. Send the money. I said, wait a minute. We have money that shouldn't go because we caught it before it was sent out, but they want the money to go anyway. And I think you're going to have a lot of things to look at, Pam. I really do. What's going on with this whole thing? And this is just one group. We haven't talked about Department of Education. We haven't talked about the military. We haven't talked about a lot of things that are very big. And what's happened is, as an example, you'll have cases where you have a 3-month contract, and maybe the guy that signs the contract leaves. Maybe he gets rich. All of a sudden, he leaves for that reason. But you have a 3-month contract, and maybe he leaves. So the contract is sitting there, and the people signing the checks don't know it's 3 months. And it goes on for years. The 3 months turns out to be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years.
That's got to be corruption, man.
Just goes on forever.
Yeah, like,
and the guy on the other side of the contract just keeps getting check after check after check. Because Elon had an expression yesterday, because nobody cares. It's a great expression. Nobody cares. The guy that signed the contract didn't care. Maybe there, may not be there. Maybe crooked. Who knows? But you have to care. Otherwise, you can't really run a thing like that, or you can't run a country, really, because there's so many transactions, thousands and thousands of transactions. And if you don't have people that care, you're going to lose control. And that's what's happened. And we've caught it. Now, what we caught is billions and billions of dollars, but it's a tiny fraction of the real number, because you can never catch the real number because people have gotten away with tremendous amounts of money. But I said we have to make our government smaller, more efficient, more effective, and a lot less expensive. And we could find $1 trillion, but we're being hindered by courts where they file in certain courts where it's very hard to win. And a judge will stop us, and a judge will say that it doesn't make any difference what you find. You just keep paying the money. That's a hell of a way to be. And I follow the courts. I have to follow the law. All it means is that we appeal. But that gives people time to cover their tracks.
That's the roaches.
And that's what they do. So it's a very bad thing that's taking place. But hopefully, if the courts, hopefully the courts will be fair. They don't have to be very fair. They just have to be a little bit fair, because this is so egregious what's taken place. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Nobody's seen numbers like this. These are massive numbers. $9 million for somebody to go and stand in a store and see how people shop. Okay? I mean, you take a look at these things. It's a disgrace.
That's a good job. Yeah, it's a great job. Look at that.
Make America great again. It's very hard to make America great again when you have things like this. And you're going to see the same thing. Department of Education is going to be a disaster. The military, I mean, I see it. Look, I came in, they had a contract done, as you know, for $5.7 billion for airplanes. It was Air Force One with Boeing. 5.7. I got it down to $4 billion. Little less than that, 1 penny less than that. $3,999,999 and 99 cents. I said, has to have a 3 in front of it, because I wouldn't sign the contract for $5.7 billion. I was able to cut $1.7 billion off the price.
Jesus Christ.
And it didn't take me long. $1.7 billion. If people would care, they'd be able to do that with every single contract that's put before them. And we wouldn't have deficits, would have nothing but a tremendously low-taxed, wonderful country. But they have to care. And speaking of that, you know, Boeing, we're not happy with the service we're getting in terms of those planes. They would like to get more money. We're not happy about that whole thing. We signed a very strong contract. I signed a guaranteed maximum contract, which they haven't seen in a long time. And they're saying they're getting hurt by it, but they have to produce the product, and we expect them to produce the product. They have to produce the product. They agreed to build planes at a certain price. They're not used to that. They're used to having time and material contracts, where it's whatever it costs, time and material, no dates, no
Trump, don't say bad stuff about Boeing.
Costing 5 times more.
Yeah, whatever happened with those planes?
Take
That's
a
crazy.
look at the Gerald Ford.
Wow.
The aircraft carrier, the Ford. It was supposed to cost $3 billion. It ends up costing like $18 billion. And they make, of course, all electric catapults, which don't work. And they have all magnetic elevators. They lift up 25 planes at a time, 20 planes at a time. And instead of using hydraulic, like on tractors that can handle anything from hurricanes to lightning to anything, they use magnets. It's a new theory. Magnets are going to lift the planes up.
Seems like a good idea, maybe.
And they had billions and billions of dollars of cost overruns. I met the architect. I said, have you designed a ship before? This is one of the biggest ships in the world. It's like landing at LaGuardia Airport. But you look at the kind of waste, fraud, and abuse that this country is going through, and we have to straighten it out. We have great people going into the military in terms of we need ships, we need a lot of things. We have great people we have business people going in. But when you look at what's happened to our purchasing, and when you look at the USAID, when you look at the things that they're giving to them, the billions of dollars that they're giving to, and it doesn't make sense. It is interesting that when you're looking for fraud, you look at items, hundreds of items, and you'll find one or two, maybe, if you're lucky. Here's something
He said
where
this
you
he
look
said
at
it's
it,
the opposite.
and they're all fraudulent. You know, by
Yeah.
just looking at the topic, they're all fraudulent, except it's the opposite. You'll find one or two that's like
It's crazy. I knew what he was going to
So,
say because he just says the same shit.
I just want to thank Elon for
Yeah.
going through it. I want to thank all the
Wrap it
people
up.
that are
We got the
working
Sony
with him. You know,
thing.
we have a big group of people. I think the lowest IQ is about 160. That's very high. I think you have a couple of 182s in there, but they're doing a fantastic job. They don't. He
There's no
doesn't need it,
teleprompter?
and
Yeah.
they don't need it. But we're showing things, and it's going to be it's a big. People have no idea how important it is. Yeah.
How soon do you want the Department of Education to be closed?
Oh, I'd like it to be closed immediately. Look, the Department of Education's a big con job. We're ranked, so they rank the top 40 countries in the world. We're ranked number 40th, but we're ranked number 1 in one department, cost per pupil. So we spend more per pupil than any other country in the world, but we're ranked number 40. We've been between 38 and 40. The last time I looked, it was 38, and then I looked 2 days ago. It came out the new list.
We'll give it 5 more
It
minutes.
came out at number 40, so we're ranked 40. Norway, Denmark.
So I feel like this is like a
Sweden.
TikTok.
I
We
hate
got
to say
three
it, China,
videos
as big
going.
As it is, it's ranked in the
Yeah,
top
with
5.
me reacting. Yeah.
And that's a primary competitor. We're ranked number 40. So if we're ranked number 40, that means something's really wrong, right? And I say send it back to Iowa, to Idaho, to Colorado. Send it back to places that, and a lot of Indiana.
He's all over
You
the
have a
place
great
today.
new governor. You have a great senator that Jim Banks just got elected. You got great people. I'll tell you what, Indiana's going to be fantastic. We probably have 35, maybe 37 states that will do as well as Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden. They'll be just as good. Then you have the ones that we all know about. It'll be the same story. But you know what? Even they will be good. Because you look at New York, you give it to
Just what I was
Westchester
saying
County,
about
you give
earlier.
it to Long Island, you give it to Nassau County, you give it to Suffolk County. Same thing you go out to, and you give it to upstate New York. So you'd have 4
See?
or 5 sections.
So what's happening?
You give it to Manhattan. Manhattan's a little bit tougher for some reason. I don't know why it would be tougher, but it is. You give to California, and you go to various areas outside of Los Angeles, and you might have 6 or 7 different subgroups. But generally, like if you go to Iowa, you give it to Iowa. You don't have subgroups, you have Iowa. And other places that do a good job. If they do a good job,
Are we
they're
in a
going to do a
cult,
great
bro?
job in education.
For sure.
Those places will be every bit as good as the various countries that do so well. All the time, it's the same countries that are doing well. And so we have a Department of Education where people from Washington, D.C., who in many cases don't care about the kids out in the country. They don't care about the farms and the farmer's daughter and the farmer's sons. We have a massive bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. We have buildings that are all over the city. Department of Education. I never said Department of Education's on all these buildings. By the way, nobody shows up to work because they're all working at home. You know, quote, working at home. They're not working at home. And a lot of them have second jobs. And that's the other thing that Elon Musk is looking at.
Oh, shit.
How many of these people are getting checks, working at home, but they're not
here we
working
go.
because they have second
Here we
jobs
go.
and even third jobs? You're going to find a lot of them. And
Yeah,
those
that's
people are going
true.
to be fired because we have to make our government
There's like a whole
smaller.
subreddit.
All right,
It's like
one
an
more
overemployed.
question.
All right, one more.
Yeah, Jennifer. go
One
ahead.
more.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, sir. 2 questions, one on Ukraine again, and then another one on the Kennedy
This is
Center.
perfect, bro.
Do
He's
you
ending
think
it for me
that
to watch
by-
the PlayStation event.
As far as your negotiating
W. Trump.
tactics go,
Thank you, man.
Pete Hegseth take away some of your negotiating
Yeah.
abilities with Putin
Yeah,
by
he knows.
taking Ukraine's sovereign
Trying to
integrity
do- yeah,
off the
he's
table
trying to
by
keep
Putin.
us on schedule.
I haven't done that. I'm back in Ukraine. I'm back in Ukraine. Don't
Thank God.
say that. I'm approving, but I do want security for our money. You know, Europe is getting security. You know that, right? They're giving their money in the form of a loan. Nobody knows that. And why are we at 350 billion and Europe, which doesn't separate with an ocean like we do, we have a little thing called an ocean in between. Why is it that Europe is paying
He's right about
200
this.
billion less than us to
It's
help
bullshit.
Ukraine? Very similar
Total
size. If you
bullshit.
add up all the European countries, it's a little bit smaller than the U.S.
Yeah.
in terms of the economy. Why is it that they're not paying the kind of numbers that they should be paying? And then on top of it, and I've been saying this to Biden, I told Biden, I said, you ought to be asking for either a loan or some kind of a security, like their oil and gas or something for the money.
Then correct me.
You're putting up much more money.
You can post a correction on
and you have
Twitter
no security. Europe's
or
putting
Reddit.
up a much smaller amount.
This is what my understanding
is. It's in the
is.
form of a loan. Because we have people that were incompetent in the last administration, grossly incompetent, and we're changing it. But we change it, and all we do is we get hit by lawsuits from the radical left all the time. But here we are. We stand, and I guess we've done okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Man.
President Trump has just spoken with Russian President Putin, and some details come directly from the president. He has just put out on his Truth Social, and so it's everywhere now, that they discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy, artificial intelligence, and the dollar. He also revealed the two agreed to visit each other's countries. He said, I had a lengthy and highly productive phone call with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. I just read what he said they talked about. We both reflected on the great history of our nations and the fact that we fought so successfully together in World War II.
I just remember the interview that Tucker Carlson did with Putin. And then, like, he asked Putin a question, and Putin's like, well, in 1504. And it's like, oh shit. 3-hour interview, yeah.
That Russia lost tens of millions of people, as we likewise lost so many. We each talked about the strengths of our respective nations and the great benefit that we will someday have in working together. But first, as we both agreed, so this is Trump posting about his recent call just moments ago with Putin.
Damn.
He said, but first, as we both agreed, we want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war with Russia and Ukraine. President Putin even used my very strong campaign motto of common sense. We both believe very strongly in it. We agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations. We also have agreed to our respective terms, starting negotiations immediately. And we will begin by calling President Zelensky of Ukraine to inform him of the conversation, something which I will be doing right now.
Holy fuck, thank God. I just, like, the only thing that I'm worried about is that this negotiation ends with capitulation to Russia, where Ukraine has to lose ground, which I think is unfair. That's my main concern and my main worry. That will happen. A lot of people are worried about that. I'm willing to listen to an argument for why that's okay, but my gut feeling is that it's bad.
So this is playing out contemporaneously as we're here live on Outnumbered. I have asked Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Director of CIA John Radcliffe, National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Ambassador and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to lead the negotiations, which I feel strongly about will be successful. Millions of people have died.
Let's discuss what's the alternatives. I really hate to invoke this because I feel like 90% of times people invoke this. It's bullshit. But I think that appeasement didn't work with Hitler. And I think that now Putin now has 2 points on a line where he annexed Crimea. And now he's doing this with Ukraine. I find this to be unsettling. It's an unsettling pattern of behavior that I don't think should be reinforced. And I think the entire rest of the, like, global, people should be against it. Why should he stop? Well, because there's massive sanctions on Russia. And so that's the way that I feel about it. Like, I don't have, like, a super strong... Like, I don't hate Putin. I don't, like, hate Russia. But I think that what they're doing is, from everything that I understand, maybe I'm totally misinformed, but it really seems like they're the aggressor, and it's just massively fucked up what's been happening. And it's like, I've had people say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, and they show me something, and it's just some bullshit, right? And so anyway, yeah, no, I'm a big supporter. As I said before, I'm a big supporter of Ukraine. And so that's my concern. U.S. president shouldn't be toying around with Europe. I think that it's fair to say that the U.S. president shouldn't be toying around with Europe, but I think it's also fair to say that the way that basically the U.S. is using Ukraine as a proxy to prevent Russian expansionism, I think that especially in the context of how that happened in World War II, it makes a lot of historical sense. And I don't think that NATO is a bad thing. I think that the amount of money that the U.S. puts into NATO is a bad thing. But at a fundamental level, I think NATO's good. Does that make sense?
War that would have not happened if I were president, but it did happen, so it must end. No more lives should be lost, President Trump writes. I want to thank President Putin for his time and effort with respect to this call and for the release yesterday of Mark Fogel, a wonderful man that I personally greeted last night at the White House.
I saw that.
I believe this effort will lead to a successful conclusion, hopefully soon. The President of the United States.
That's great.
Charles.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Hands-on, getting things done. It's hard to put it into words. You know, I actually was getting goosebumps as you read that because of what we've already seen. You know, just in the last few weeks, what we've already seen, including getting Mark Fogel home. And it just makes you feel pretty confident that this conflict will be resolved much sooner than anyone had anticipated. And to President Trump's point, it did not start under his watch and probably would not have started on his watch.
Who knows?
You know, it is a promise that we now know on July 13th, the conversations that he was having with Mark Fogel's now 95-year-old mother.
Yeah.
And he promised her he would bring Mark Fogel home. And he talks
20%
about
believe in Russian propaganda. I think that a lot of the people that are against Ukraine are just isolationist, period. So they're not really against Ukraine, like, on principle, or like in a specific sense. They just don't want us involving ourselves in a war in Europe. So it's not about like whether Ukraine is wrong or not. They just don't want to deal with it. It's not naive. I think that's the way a lot of people see it. It is.
Promises made, promises kept, and we think, okay, campaign, that has to do with all of America. But it can be personal, too. You've been there with a front row seat when it gets personal, Kaylee.
Yes, and that was a very personal story he shared, and it was very interesting and fascinating to hear. And I think, look, reading that tweet, that Truth Social, as you did, I was just thinking back about foreign policy over the last decade and a half. And you think about President Obama, and you think about Putin and his invasion of Crimea that happened. And, you know, Obama responded with minor sanctions. Then Trump comes in, and it's stability for 4 years. There's no Russia annexing X, Y, or Z. And then you bring in Biden, and then you get a war in Ukraine. And then Trump, here we are, just over 3 weeks' time, Mark Fogel's released. Then there's this conversation, and you're talking about winding down the war in Ukraine. If President Trump, and look, there's a lot of ifs. We don't know what will happen. If he manages to wind down the war in Ukraine, get a status quo in the Middle East where Iran is on its heels, where you get a Saudi peace deal, this is legacy-defining presidential moves on the foreign policy stage that would put you in the realm of Ronald Reagan. Again, a lot to be played out. We're only 3 weeks in, but these are very encouraging signs 3 weeks in.
You know, I know it's a big moment, and on this couch, Kaylee and Emily and I will all talk about our faith. And I think at this time, our enemies don't like this. And if you were ever going to pray for a president and the United States of America, now would be a really good time to pray for our protection as a nation and for his. You talk about the speed at which he's moving. Our enemies are leaning all the way in now.
10 hostages released in 3 weeks. And to Mark Vogel's point, when he was released, he thanked the entire diplomatic corps and so many pairs of hands that each played a part under what he called the President of the United States as his hero's direction. To your point, the action, the speed of which the Americans
this was last night. I remember I saw a little bit about this.
Results, that families have seen results, like Mark's family. There he is right there. I mean, they have been waiting for this, and they received a phone call by the State Department during Biden's administration, letting them know that their beloved son and brother was not part of the hostage release that involved Brittany Griner earlier. And that was a horrible phone call for them to receive. Here we have, again, in that post, too, I note, number one, that President Trump referenced that negotiations will be led by the director of the CIA, by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, NSA Michael Waltz, Ambassador Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. So he says they will manage the negotiations. This is a delegation under his execution, which I think also is a hallmark of this presidency. We talked about he surrounded himself with people who have the same vision and will be in lockstep with putting America's priorities first. And the visit between the two presidents, as promised in this tweet or in this message, I think will be quite phenomenal.
Yeah, that's really important, too. Look, just real quickly, on that day, July 13th, last summer, when he had the conversation with Mark Fogel's mom, now 95, I promised to bring your son home.
Yeah, I mean, he did it. I mean, that's a great thing. I feel like, obviously, how could that not be a good thing? Majority in Ukraine wants it to end as soon as possible. I wonder how it looks like, because the problem is, like, Russia has a lot of propaganda, and it doesn't really have, like, a very free state, so it's hard really to gauge, like, what the Russian population really believes. But, like, if I'm looking at this from my perspective, it seems like Russia's lost a lot of face for how badly they've done in Ukraine. Like, I remember when the Ukraine war started, I thought that, like, Russia was going to take it over very, very quickly. So I think that it is in Putin's best interest to end it, because I do think that it probably makes him look weak and look bad. But it's just hard for me to know that, because it's like you have a language barrier, culture barrier, and also propaganda barrier. But, like, if I'm just thinking about this from, like, a common sense perspective, that's what makes sense to me.
Just 2 or 3 hours within that whole realm was the first assassination attempt.
Yes.
A presidential candidate who'd been shot in Pennsylvania, Butler, Pennsylvania. He never lost track of that promise he made to her.
No, it actually solidified his resolve. In the 4 years, the gap in between his presidencies. And that's what's so unprecedented about this, because normally a two-term president, by their second term, they're absolutely exhausted under the weight of the responsibility of the job. You know, we've never seen in our lifetime someone who has 4 years to really consider what they would do, you know, with the energy of getting back into the White House. But what actually makes me, I'm not surprised by this based on what he's done. What makes me really sad is that Joe Biden could have picked up the phone. Joe Biden could have had this conversation. Joe Biden could have preserved hundreds, thousands of lives. I mean, if this is what it takes.
It's impossible to know. I don't think it's fair to blame it on him, because you don't know what Trump is saying or willing to do in order to get Putin to come to the table. Like, it's too early to say.
I would like to think so. If it's as simple as a conversation.
Yeah.
The $100 billion we sent to Ukraine, how many hundreds of thousands of people dead?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I guess I just asked, could the man who managed to call people garbage on the right side of the aisle in the latter days, who hurt the presidential candidate for sure on the Democratic side, could that man have led to this much? Could he have accomplished it?
Well, now we get to look forward. We don't even have to look back.
We don't have to look back.
Well, there it is. And, yeah, at least he's talking to Putin instead of sending mixed messages. Biden couldn't do shit. I don't know. I'll link you guys the video real quick.